This one was really calm. American Don Pruitt swears he fell asleep in a race like this. Break down once in these waters, and you may think about doing it in every race. Helping hands and pretty girls swarm about the helpless boat. The Italians and Americans have always gotten along. This race, and a lot more on the European continent. Don retired at 35, and his family thought they'd see more of him. They did, in the newspapers.
I think I probably spend more time with my race boats than I ever did in my own business, mainly because I enjoy it. Oh, I love the rough water, but you do take a physical beating. I've been in races where I've actually had to be pulled out of a boat. You're just physically beat and injured. Well, I've had in some of my boats broken nose, one, broken ribs in another, broken shoulder in another, broken leg in another. Well, there's all sorts of injuries, aside from the internal injuries that shake people apart. It takes a lot of maturity, because you're racing not only against the competitors, but against yourself, to see how much stamina you have. There's nobody out there watching you, and nobody cares out there just what you're doing. So you have to race against yourself and try to judge just how far you can go yourself.
Come stai? Ciao, così attrezzato cammini tu? Che pensa a cose di moglie? A proposito di moglie, usted ha visto mia moglie stamattina nel coso, perché ha incominciato a fare gli occhi, mia moglie mi ha detto, ma chi è quello col cappello?
Traveling to the Mediterranean is special for boats and racing, because that's where it all began. In our Western civilization, there's a 5,000-year history of boats and men against the sea. It's the setting for probably the greatest boat story of all, the Odyssey. Of course, Ulysses wasn't making the trip around the Mediterranean for sport, and the seas and the gods weren't making things any easier for him. The ancient Greeks knew the sea well and respected it. And what they couldn't understand, they blamed on the gods. Vicious winds, adverse currents, rocks, and whirlpools were all controlled by old Neptune, ruler of the seas. Sometimes it's not too hard to believe those stories when you try to figure out the Mediterranean, or any body of water for that matter. One day it will be calm and peaceful. The next day, who knows? Sometimes, in a long race, the rest of the field has dropped back or are far ahead. The sea has flattened out a bit. It does that sometimes when darkness nears. The water is filled with reflections and strange abstractions of light colors. Everything is wild and unreal. The boat, like a giant sea chariot of fiber and metal, runs screaming across the shining ocean, reaching sunward and flat out. And these are moments when an ocean racer feels completely free. And suddenly it's worth all the expense and punishment. This is the reward of true adventure. And if you're lucky, all your yesterdays get mixed up with tomorrows. And you're alone and free. The sea is one frontier that men in small boats will never conquer. That's the lure. That's why men rise to challenge such a foe. Where else can man meet an adversary who will pummel him to death one minute, then romance him the next? Ocean powerboat racing is an exciting love affair between man and his element.